Hello, and thank you for watching this enlightening video with Chairman Larry Gonzalez, author of the Autism Mandate Bill in Texas. The chairman's passion for politics and policy, as well as being touched by autism in his personal life through his son Alexander, is what led him to bring forth and get passed one of the most important bills for autism coverage in the history of the state of Texas. Having spent a large portion of his early career helping people get elected, Gonzalez's budget expertise led him to serve in the Texas Legislature from 2011 to 2018. During this time, he served as chairman of the Sunset Advisory Commission and as chairman of the House Appropriations Subcommittee for the Texas House of Representatives. In this interview, Chairman Gonzalez discusses his lengthy career in Texas politics, his love of art, workforce development, and his passion for supporting his son, which has led to a life of him being in service and support of others. Meet Chairman Larry Gonzalez.
Kind of my whole life is politics. When I was a junior in college, I was taking a class and there was an internship available at the state capitol. So at 21 years old, I just walked over to the state capitol and started working for a state rep and fell in love with the building, the work, the mission, what he was working on. And boy, I graduated and just got a job at the capitol and have been there ever since. I did take an exit for a while in that I worked on campaigns. So I own a company called Lazarus Graphics, started in 1996, and I designed direct mail for campaigns. So here's my life. I would work a legislative session in Texas, which is only 5 months every 2 years. So I work a legislative session, and I would spend the next year and a half running campaigns, get a lot of new people elected, come back work session, year and a half of campaigns. I did that for 20 years. That was my cycle. And so it's kind of always been in politics. It's always been in government. It's always been in this service, kind of government service. And that's been my collective career for 33 years now. From everything from U.S. Congress to county commissioner and school board. So here's the crazy thing. I wanted to be an artist growing up. And the good Lord blessed me with some skills. And my father, the aerospace engineer from the University of Texas, Mission Control at NASA, thought that being an artist isn't exactly what he wanted for me. So so I went to school and did some other stuff, but I always wanted to be an artist. So when I started working on campaigns, the consultant asked me, do you know how to design direct mail? I don't. Photoshop had just come out. All the Adobe products had just been invented. This is like 91, 92. So I just taught myself how to design political direct mail. And so I was able to take the government side that I enjoyed together with the art side that I really wanted to do. And I made a living designing all that junk you get in your mailbox that you don't like. I got 5 cents a piece, and I didn't care if you read it or not. I got to write all the copy. I got to do all the government things. I got to write about the policy, about the votes, the voting records in a medium that allowed me to use the art. Kind of a cool system. So I would do, to circle back, I would do a session of policy, but then a year and a half of policy and direct mail and art and campaigning for people and getting the good guys elected. And then we did all over again 2 years later. And that was my cycle for 20 years. And we did direct mail and logo design for everybody. I mean, everybody. And it's extremely lucrative and it was great. And you did good stuff and you made a living doing what you want to do. How many people can say that? Either hyper photorealism, everything black and white, charcoal, pencil, ink, black and white, don't like color, don't understand color, don't know how to use color, watercolors, paints, not my thing. But black and white was my medium. But I'll tell you what I wanted to do was I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to be the next Gary Larson. I wanted to be that guy who had something really smart and witty, where the sense of humor is not right in front of you. The joke is a couple of steps away. If you read The Far Side by Gary Larson, that's kind of my thing, right? And so I wanted to be the next Gary Larson and take my artwork and personality and sense of humor and put it all together. I grew up, my father was an aerospace engineer, worked at NASA, as I said, but he and my mom also pastored a Spanish-speaking Pentecostal church. The humor writes itself. Right? I had so much material growing up a preacher's kid. Goodness gracious, there's a reason why we're all kind of messed up, and tons of material, I'm sure, to write a cartoon about. But hey, I think my life worked out all right. My dad is very quiet, doesn't talk, has very limited personality. He's an engineer, right? He's the engineer guy. And the only time he has spoken at length about NASA and Apollo and all the incredible things he did for 43 years was after the movie Apollo 13 came out. We come back from the movie, okay, we got some questions for you. And we started asking my dad all these questions about Apollo 13. And he had the real life anecdotal version and explanation of all of that. And it was fascinating. Because just on topic, it was pretty cool anyway, but he's never spoken to us like that before. He's never talked about work before. So to hear him talk about the astronauts and getting them home and making the air filter out of random parts and using the moon as a slingshot and all these things in the movie, to hear him talk about it as a participant was absolutely amazing. He's got the coolest things. I'll say things just real quick. Apollo 13 blew up and there wasn't a plan to get them home. It's the premise of the movie, right? So Apollo 14, 15, 16, and 17, they put together a team to write an abort plan. What happens if something goes wrong? So my dad led that team, and my dad is the author of those abort plans. And he has them. I've never seen them in my life. A couple of years ago, he shows me the actual abort plan that NASA produced for the astronauts, authored by Larry Gonzalez Jr. It's just the most amazing thing. And I say that because he's never told us that his whole life, right? And I asked him, why didn't you say that? Why don't you? And his response is always, it's work. It's work to me. And it's taken me all these years to get where I am with all the people I know and everything I've done and the presidents I've met and the governors I've met and the traveling I've done and the Capitol buildings I've been in. Do I realize what he meant back then? It's work, right? And so people look at all these incredible things with my gavels and all the chairmanships and all these incredible things. And don't get me wrong, I'm very honored. It's also work, right? It's what I do. It's what I do. So I appreciate my dad's comment a whole lot more at 54 than I did probably at 44. Was it's my life's work, right? It's work for me. And is it cool? Yes. And do people benefit? And do you get to do really, really good things and significantly help people and generationally change the direction of their lives? Absolutely. And I've been honored to do that. That's the coolest thing, is that you can change people's lives. You can change the direction of their lives. That's what's neat about my gig. My little one, Alexander, is on the spectrum. And so we were living it as mom and dad, right? Long before I was elected, we were living it as mom and dad. My wife's entire career is in special education. So my wife just retired in December after being the executive director of special education for Round Rock ISD. She was the boss, the jefe. I mean, she was it. And she ran this incredible SPED program in Round Rock ISD. So when I got elected with my son and my wife where she was, I found myself in a position to problem solve for Alexander legislatively. I was in a position to fix his problems, right? It's what we do. We change the law. So I think when the good Lord had Alexander in heaven and needed a place for him to go, I think the good Lord knew where I would be one day and knew where Marie would be one day. And these two young kids got this special kid. And we have been able to change and affect countless numbers of families and lives because of my son, right? If I didn't have Alexander, I don't know that I would have been on this topic as much as I was as a legislator. But he was 7 when I started this, and he was going through elementary school and middle school. Middle school is a bear. And as he was going through all these issues, I was trying to problem solve for him. And we can talk about the topics later, the specific bills. But that's how I solved his issues, changing the law. And by the way, when I did that, I was changing the law for every other kid just like him, right? Just like him. And you run for office for a lot of reasons. But when you begin to realize the scope of what you've been able to accomplish for other families, it's kind of your aha moment. Like, yeah, that's pretty cool. You know, that was pretty cool that we're able to do those things. But the genesis, to answer your question, is my son and problem solving his issues. Solved a lot of issues for a lot of other people. So whether it was the licensure, whether it was adaptive PE, whether it was insurance, whether it was all these things that we worked on, you have to personalize it, because you would love to think that the policy stands alone in and of itself in its own silo, and that is not the case. The politics, and particularly the partisan politics, are a huge part of the variables that you have to navigate in the legislative process. Policy doesn't win. Policy comes fourth behind, politics and partisanship and other things. And so it is a challenge to get really good policy done, because when you look at different areas of topics, let's take, for example, getting insurance to pay for this coverage. That was an insurance mandate. As I was reminded, the 62nd insurance mandate in Texas, and my Republican colleagues just didn't want to do it because it was an insurance mandate. Insurance company want to do it, but we personalized it. And those of us on the House floor with children and families, we talked about how it affects our kids and our families. And it wasn't some theoretical white paper think tank, something out of DC. It was personal to us. And so I'll tell you, we had one bill that was talking about insurance paying for this coverage for the therapy. And I was in committee, and a lot of my colleagues were very wrapped up in the costs. And they weren't seeing the personal side of what we were trying to say. So I finally said to my colleague, I said, Van, have you ever had a birthday party for your kid and nobody shows up? I have. What does that cost? Right? Thank God some cousins came in from Houston and there was somebody there. And the room just goes silent. The insurance companies pulled their opposition cards. They didn't testify against the bill because we were able to explain to them By the way, the answer was 31 cents. Everyone in Texas pays 31 cents a month to make sure that my kid and kids like my kid can get insurance to pay for some services, right? But the mandate conversation and the cost conversation was just, they were missing the point, man. The point was about making these kids successful contributing members of society, right? And I finally just used that argument, and it worked. It worked. So when you talk about licensure and adaptive PE and all these things that we've done, Medicaid funding and things like that, it was always the same premise, was that you had to personalize it, because the soundbite is exhausting when we're talking about lives, right? Like lives. And it was an effort. It was an effort. And on licensure, we said, look, if you are wealthy, you can get these services for your kid. We had made sure insurance would pay for it now. Okay, so if you're employed with insurance, thanks to the Texas Legislature, insurance now covers this for your kid. What piece of the pie were we missing? The very poor. Medicaid, right? They weren't taken care of. Well, how do we do that? How do we get those kids taken care of? Well, we found out that Medicaid would only reimburse for a licensed professional. And we went, all right, we got to license them. So the premise behind, and look, different people have different reasons why Senate Bill 589 meant something, and the different mechanisms and things like that. But the overarching premise was this: the individual payer was covered, the insurance company covered. We needed the Medicaid population covered, and to do that, we had to get them licensed. And that was the overarching premise behind the bill. And so when you say it like that, when you tell people, listen, we've taken care of these two, but are you telling me that we're missing the most vulnerable? I mean, they're already by definition the most vulnerable because they're in this population and they're on the spectrum and they can't get help. That's just going to compound the problem generationally. So let's fix it here. Let's fix these guys too. And that was the premise behind that entire bill, was getting them licensed. The Legislative Budget Board is a state agency that puts a fiscal note on all the legislation. Okay. So they say it's 31 cents a person. And so that's the number, right? That's kind of the number that we're working with. But then I have to argue, because they don't, I have to argue the opportunity cost and what that means, to your point, as an adult. So say Alexander. Okay, my son Alexander. Either he gets the services he needs and becomes trainable and employable and has a job and makes money and pays taxes and becomes a contributing part of this society, community, at 31 cents a month, or we don't pay the 31 cents and he takes. Rather than putting in for the rest of his life, he pulls out the rest of his life, right? So either Alexander can put money into the system, or he will forever take money out of the system for services that he needs in the Medicaid population and social services and safety net things, which I understand. But here we have an opportunity to keep this kid out of the pull from the system and put him in the category of putting into the system. And that's the thing that the LBB wouldn't contemplate in a fiscal note. They don't put those kinds of things in a fiscal note for the bill. So we have to argue that, right? And that's our job then, is say, yes, it's 31 cents. We get that. However, there's a much bigger ROI when this child and grows up and becomes employable and has a job and has an apartment and can pay some bills. And what does that mean for the parents who don't have to quit their job to take care of a 28-year-old son on the spectrum? Mom and dad can still work because son is working, and it all kind of works together. But you know that when son or daughter is 28, 29, 30 years old, adult parent stays home with them, we've taken the parents out of the market too. And the parents are no longer contributing and putting into the system, right? So these are the kinds of things when you talk about cost. What does the bill cost? I mean, you can't put a number on it, right? Because there's so many variables. So our argument was it's going to cost us more in the long run than it costs us right now. We knew we were okay. I'm on the House floor the day of the vote, and my Republican colleagues, Tryon Lewis, great guy from Odessa, older man, he says, Larry, he says, man, your bill's an insurance mandate. I don't think that's a very Republican thing to do because I'm elected Republican. He says, but I trust you as a dad that this is the right thing to do. I was like, all right. So I'm feeling on the floor. The members are coming around a little bit and they're getting past the insurance argument. They're getting past the mandate and the big government argument, and they're hearing the personal side, right? And we also knew we were okay because as it pertains to the legislation here on the licensure, you know, we came out of the House Committee 8-0. We came out of the Senate Committee 10-0. We came out of the full House 121-5. We came out of the Senate 25-6. I mean, we had some really great numbers, right? And a matter of fact, that House vote, you know, I think it was a voice vote even. Like it was just a voice vote. The board didn't light up. It was pretty cool just to hear all the members yell aye, right? So we knew we were doing okay, and we knew we were winning little by little. Now, it's no guarantee the governor signs it, right? It's no guarantee the governor signs it, and so you still have to work the governor's office, and the governor's policy people were working with us the entire time. And but what really helps, it's just the personalization of it, man. It's everybody has a nephew, everybody has a niece, everybody has, you know, a family member, and so we weren't telling a story that people were unfamiliar with. They were very familiar with what we're talking about. So yeah, the governor signed it, but we knew we were okay. Every autism bill that I filed got passed and signed by the governor, and I think largely it was because we framed it in a way that it wasn't, you know, God bless the think tanks. Don't get me wrong. That's a nice foundation to have. All the data, all the numbers is a great foundation to have, but you have to personalize it. I was in a bus. Gosh, I was in Minnesota. It was a national conference of legislators. And this guy sees my name tag. You're from Texas? I said, I am. He says, hey, you just passed a bill there on some autism services. I said, we did. He says, we're trying to pass that in Georgia. Red House, red Senate, red governor. He says, we're running into a lot of problems from the insurance lobby and kind of the big government perspective. He said, how did you, he goes, what do you know about that bill? I said, everything. It's my bill, man. And he says, how'd you pass it? And I said, telling stories. Telling stories. You have to tell a story. That's what you do. And so on that particular bill, on the insurance, they wound up passing that in Georgia. And then Autism Speaks got it. And they used that as a model template in other states. And it started passing all over the country. But the genesis was here. Right. So my son, let's fast forward. My son is now 22. He's about to graduate with an associate's degree in what? Visual communication and graphic design. He's amazing. He has all the talent I have and then exponentially more. So we are still writing that story because I'm teaching him now the business side of graphic design. So Lazarus Graphics is my company name. It's been dormant for a little while. I got it back up and going. I got the checking account. I got the website. I got Lazarus Graphics up and running. And now all my friends are sending Alexander work. Using my network of people saying, hey, Alexander is going to jumpstart Lazarus Graphics when he graduates. Send him some work. And here it comes. I think he has 4 projects right now that he's working on, right? So we were sitting there. I'm very, very busy. And then I get home and I'm running Lazarus Graphics on top of my own company. And so Alexander and I are working on brochures. We're working on logo designs for a church, working on logo designs for a family foundation. And I'm showing him not just the art side of working with clients, interfacing with clients, communication with clients, making changes, making edits, and how that all works. But now we're about to start billing for that work. So I'm going to show him now the business side of that. And by the way, when that family foundation needs letterhead, we get a cut, right? They're going to charge us $200. We're going to charge them $220. We're going to make $20 off that, right? So now I'm showing Alexander how to make money off his artwork. Not just selling a painting, a one-time painting for, $600. I'm talking about selling stuff, right? I mean, making a living doing this with different projects. So the script is, I wanted to do this artwork. And the good Lord said, I got you something else for you to do for a while. And it was still the artwork and designing mail. And it was getting people elected for 20 years. So that when I ran for office myself, against an incumbent, mind you, everyone got on my side because I had gotten them elected. So because of all my campaign work and direct mail, was I able to get all the money and resources to run myself. Well, once I got there, we start doing all these incredible things in the world of autism and making some lives a little bit better. Here comes Alexander as an adult now, and I need him to be this contributing member of society that I argued for. I mean, that was the argument I made, right? I said, if we do this, then this happens. Well, I have to make that statement true. And so that's what we're doing right now. We're making that statement true where Alexander can make a living and he can pay a little bit of taxes and he can have a meaningful life, that he wakes up with purpose, that he wakes up happy, and he has something to do that day. That's our goal. That's our goal, is that he's living a life that he enjoys with purpose. He contributes, and then he's happy. And that's not a case for a bunch of unemployed, untrained, 28-year-old adults on the spectrum who are playing video games all day, which is a sad reality for a whole lot of this population, is their lives aren't moving towards something, not just for themselves, for the greater community, right? So I argued we have to do this to help that kid. Well, that kid's now, he's 22 years old, about to graduate. And so it's my goal to make that statement true all these years later through Alexander. He was the genesis of all this anyway. So I got to see that all the way through to make the statement accurate. If you look at the suicide rates of young adults with autism from 18 to 23, because what happens is that routine of their day and the people in their lives every day ends in when they graduate high school, right? And so now either they go into higher education, community college, job, workforce somewhere, and they continue that kind of meaningful life, or they don't. And so they start to question when they're home all day. They start to question self-worth, self-value. Why am I here? Because they're not doing anything, right, and they're just at home. And so you start to see these young adults really struggle. I will tell you, look, the other thing we did in Texas was, we did some medicinal marijuana for these kids on the spectrum. And in Texas, it doesn't get any redder than Texas, but we started with epilepsy only, let that program go on its feet. Let everybody know, hey, it actually works. Not a bunch of druggies looking for some marijuana for recreational purposes. We had to prove out epilepsy for 4 years. Once we proved out epilepsy, we were able to add other things. Autism is one of them. But we've talked about PTSD and cancer and hospice care and some other things. But we have to prove it out in that it does work. And so yes, it's therapy, and it's maybe some medication, and it's maybe a whole lot of parenting, and it's a whole lot of help from Austin Community College. Austin Community College has a STEPS program, and it's for adults with special needs, and it's workforce training, really, is what it is. That's yes, because I need these kids to graduate high school and have something else. Right? So yeah, we prepare for that with adaptive PE, which we passed here, and other kind of social skills kind of programs to get them to a point where Alexander can be trained and is trainable. Now, Alexander's issue, which is a wonderful thing, he's freaking brilliant. It's brilliant. His older sister, National Merit Scholar semifinalist, graduated honors, University of Arizona, getting her doctorate right now. Leah is amazing. Alexander's every bit as smart. Inherently, he's every bit as brilliant as his sister. It's just packaged differently, man. And it's a different skill set. So mommy and daddy have to figure out, how do we take this package and allow him and make a way for and create a path for him to be the best version of Alexander he can be. We have high expectations for him. He goes to community college. He works 20 plus hours a week at the mall. Like we push, man. We push. No breaks from us. We're never going to let him just say, woe is me. No. And we're going to find a way to make it work. And so he gets pushed pretty hard, and he's been very successful, but he's brilliant. And so we've worked our whole lives. And again, not everybody has the benefit of their dad's the state rep and their mom is the executive director of special ed for the school district where you attend, right? But when his first grade class calls and says, hey, we have extra money for a sound system, teacher wears a mic, and the school was saying, where do we put it? They were like, Representative Gonzalez has a kid. So it went to Alex's classroom. So, he did have some extra benefit locally from who his mom and dad are. And not everybody has that. I understand. But what we were able to do, Marie has 5,000 kids every year in Round Rock ISD in SPED department. What she did professionally for those 5,000 kids all those years, what I did as state rep, you hope the reach is much, much greater. Yeah, Alexander was taken care of. But the idea is that we can affect all those lives, right? And we know we did when you have some wonderful conversations with people and they recognize me, they come up to me, they tell me their story about their child, and you realize we were right, man. We were right. And we did some good work. When I left office, I did an exit interview with my local newspaper. And they said, tell us about the most significant things you've done. And I said, the most significant things I've done, you've never heard of. People think I was chairman of this and chairman of that. And they think, I appropriated for 42 state agencies and, TxDOT and the Railroad Commission, Oil and Gas and Animal Health Commission, and did some incredible things in my career. Those are the things that people hear about. Those are the things on your campaign push card. Those are the things that are on your TV commercial when you run for office. But the most significant thing I did was this. This is what we did. No one knows we did this, though. The families know. But this isn't something you put on a push card. This is something that you run a campaign around, and adaptive PE. I mean, people don't understand that kind of stuff. But those who are positively affected by that change, they know. So I told her the most significant thing I've ever done, you've never heard of, but it's our work in autism. That was the biggest thing we did in my service. So when I was elected, and Alexander was a cute little kid, lots of charity events, lots of foundations, lots of nonprofits for these kids with special needs. And we did them all. We went hunting and we went fishing and we did all these things with a lot of other kids that are physically, maybe mentally disabled. And we got invited. And so we always went. So Alexander was always on a boat fishing with all these kids and things like that. And he had this great experience with kids like him until you turn 18. And when you turn 18, nothing for you, man. That was so hard to explain to him why there was no more hunting trips, why there were no more fishing trips. Everyone loves the cute 8-year-old. But that 22-year-old doesn't get the invitation. So we found through our network a couple of places who are there for the adult population who are affected by a variety of mental health issues. And so my family and I, we started something called Matthew 5:8 Foundation. From the scripture verse, Matthew 5:8, the Beatitudes. And now we fund them. We fund these programs with our own money. Nobody else's money. We don't collect money. We don't ask for contributions. We put aside. And now we don't have the programs to help these young adults, but we have found some that do, and we fund them. The answer to your question, as you move forward, this aging population of these young adults, soon to be adults, it's a multi-step approach. It has to be. It cannot be just the government. We have to have skin in the game too as a community. So we have to have the government. We have to have our nonprofits. We have to have the people who fund the nonprofits. And the nonprofits need to do some advocacy work. I point across you to the Capitol. Then there's a job to do over there, right, in advocacy. And it's this full circle of a variety of partners that make that bridge, right? But to the person who sits there and thinks that it's just the government, it is not. I think there's some personal responsibility. I think there's some mom and dad responsibility, some grandma and grandpa responsibilities, some uncle and aunt responsibilities. And I say that from experience. I mean, I'm not just making this up, man. I mean, this is something that how we've done our lives, right? And so the school district has a part in this, right? Job for one of the things I work on now professionally, I work on a lot of workforce development. I work with a lot of training young adults for the workforce, not bachelor's, master's, PhD. There are a lot of people who care about that. I'm talking about workforce training. You graduate high school and you go get a job, right? But how do you adapt that for this population on the spectrum, right? And that's not a one entity problem to solve. We need all the partners from every aspect of that kid's lives, including the church, the synagogue, the temple, whatever you want to call it. It's everything, man. It's everything. And it's an education to teach everybody that not one entity is going to take care of this job training and workforce development to make a meaningful life. It takes all of us. It takes all of us. So we have to work with whoever's in that position in every one of those roles in a collaborative way. We've done it here. We've done it in Texas. That's why this legislation has been successful. That's why the implementation of this legislation has been successful. The adaptive PE story is great too, but that's why we've been able to do what we've done here, because there's been a lot of us partnering together. That people take the time and the energy and the effort to fight for these kids. And I say kids because I'm talking about we're starting little, right? We're starting at the diagnosis 4, 5, 6. And I can come in and affect some adaptive PE in high school, which, by the way, can I say, means an early diagnosis. Removing the stigma of having this diagnosis is critical. I know one family in particular, when you meet their 24-year-old son, you and I both know what it is right away. It doesn't take you 10 seconds to go, I know what that is. Never got the diagnosis because didn't want the stigma. and didn't want the label and didn't want the special education and didn't want the extra help. And what a huge disservice to this kid. In that mom and dad just didn't want people to know. And so, very successful now, an engineer, go figure, right? An engineer in the workforce, but it was harder than it had to be. It was harder than it had to be to get through an SAT test without additional accommodations for time, to go through all these years, 5 years of chemical engineering school without the accommodation by the university for extra time or extra help. It created a harder path than it needed to be. So, early diagnosis, helping to get rid of the stigma so mom and dad seek the help rather than avoid the help at a young age, right? That's part of the issue. So I need the mom and dad, to answer your question, moms and dads and families, to realize the importance of this is the rest of their life we're talking about at 5 and at 6 and at 10. Does it sound silly to say that? Kind of in a neurotypical world, but in this world, I need to get in there early. And so we need to really emphasize the education of not just the K through 12, but the next piece is workforce training, workforce development, getting a job. Dell, worldwide headquarters in Round Rock, Texas, my hometown, Dell has a neurodivergent program where they go and they hire specifically team members on the spectrum because they know that that team member is going to need a little extra help or a little extra consideration, or maybe the communication skills not as good as it would be in kind of a neurotypical world. So Dell is a program where they bring them in and they provide that job training for them in a way, Evan, that they hear it and they receive it and they can learn from it, right? Not just popping them into an engineering job somewhere, but an engineering job that understands that particular skill set, the limitations, the possibilities. It's an education. That's the personal side of the significance of the increase in diagnosis. We can talk all day then about the financial side, the safety net side of social services, that we don't have to pay if we pay here. Do you want $1 here or do you want $20 there? What do you want to do? And that was the argument, is the mental side, the mental health side, the contributing side, the financial side, because it will affect everybody financially as this 1 in 33 population grows up and they're not working. That's a problem, not just for their own mental health, but for our community as a whole, and how we operate and how the economic infrastructure works, how everything's tied together. And the jobs mean sales tax means roads, It's all connected. But if we have this population, 1 in 33, who's not part of that, and rather are pulling from that, it compounds itself. I mentioned Adaptive PE a few times. That's such a cool story. Insurance paying for that. We were having difficulty getting Medicaid to pay for it in its own special line item, but we did say the autism services from funds already available. So we couldn't get new money, but we could get a piece of the pie that already exists, right? So we passed that as well. All kinds of insurance and things that we did. The best way that I can answer that question is to learn from the moms and dads what's in front of them now. Because my mind goes to, as Marie was special ed director for all those years, my wife, all the struggles our kids have, right? Federal law, state law, and how do we fix them? I would really need to sit down and learn from the families right now. Where can we help? because Alexander has passed all that. So now I'm more into the workforce development side. So now I'm working with Texas State Technical College, Austin Community College. I'm working with all of these groups now to make sure these kids are employable. Samsung's coming to Taylor, Texas. Okay. Samsung, 14,000 jobs are coming to Taylor, Texas. And actually, very few of them are four-year degree jobs. You can just go get trained at a community college for a specific widget building job at Samsung and have a great job at Samsung. So now the idea is in the workforce development, how do we create a pipeline? And this is what we're working on now to answer your question. What we're working on now is how do we create a pipeline from 10th, 11th, 12th grade into Samsung? How do we create a pipeline from 10th, 11th, 12th grade into HVAC, into plumbing, knowing that this population isn't going to get a four-year degree? They're not. Let's stop telling ourselves that every kid has to get a four-year degree. They don't, particularly this group, right? So how do we then create a path from high school to the workforce for this population? That's what we're working on right now. Because particularly where I am in Central Texas, the worldwide headquarters of Dell, Samsung just brought in a plant with 14,000 people. I think Apple's up to 12,000 people now. Dell has 12,000 people in the same county. You're not 30 miles across, and this is what you have. All these incredible employers, incredible jobs. How do we get those kids in there? Well, we got to move some things around. We have to allow the high school to recognize some job training for credit, right? We have to allow the high school to offer those classes for credit that move them into these jobs at these global. I mean, Tesla's 30 minutes from here. Apple, Dell, Samsung, Tesla. So they need to tell us what they need, what they need for production. Our high schools need to work with them to provide those classes, and let's get these kids some jobs, man. So to answer your question, the big thing right now going forward is workforce development.